my boy.
Hey all, and welcome to the CDI Spotlight. This is a series where I'm going to give the spotlight to some CDI games in my collection and show off the system in general. My intention isn't necessarily to convince you that the CDI is the greatest system of all time, but instead show you that it isn't as bad as you might think that it is. The CDI is home to many games. In fact, I think the grand total is still up for debate. Looking through some of the manuals of the titles that I own, it looks like the games are sorted into different categories. Kids games, just games in general, special interest games, and digital videos. Today we're going to be looking at two from the kids category, Paint School 1 and Paint School 2, Electric Boogaloo. Okay, I made that subtitle up. Before I begin, let's talk about the controllers. My CDI came with two controllers, the remote control and the light gun, or as they call it, the Peacekeeper revolver. I have no idea if the system normally comes with the light gun, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. The remote takes two AA batteries and works fairly well for point-and-click games that feature a cursor. The light gun doesn't work for this game, obviously. There are also other controllers for the system as well. First is the gamepad controller. It reminds me a lot of the Sega Genesis controller, except that there isn't a pause button. The pause button is actually located on the system itself. This controller is good for your standard platformer games, but it's not the best for when you're playing a point-and-click game. The next controller is the CDI mouse. This mouse is fantastic for your point-and-click games, and yes, it has the old mouse ball. The last controller I have is the roller controller. This controller is good for your point-and-click games as well, and many kid titles recommend it. Unfortunately, this controller is plagued with issues which cause the ball not to work. There are guides online for how to fix it though, so maybe I'll attempt that one day and probably make a video on it as well. There's also another mouse-type controller, the trackball mouse. Unfortunately, I don't have this one, so I won't be able to show it off. There's also the CDI Commander controller, which I like to call the spoon controller for obvious reasons. I unfortunately don't have this one either. And lastly, as far as my limited research has found, is another type of gamepad controller. This one sort of resembles a SNES controller, but it has a giant joystick protruding from the D-pad. So most of these controllers will work for every game, with the exception of the Peacekeeper revolver, obviously. For Paint School 1, I'm going to be using the CDI mouse. Getting some Mario Paint vibes now. In fact, I'm also getting Color a Dinosaur vibes from the cover art. Okay, let's pop the first one in and see what we've got. I wonder if there'll be any claymation featured in the game. Probably not, but it would be pretty cool if it did. Oh boy, I wasn't expecting a whole lot given the pictures on the back of the box, but this is pretty bare bones. Okay, so how do you play the game? There's this little handy tutorial you can listen to by clicking the question mark, but I'll walk you through it. The picture in the top left is the picture you'll be coloring. If you take a look at the top right of the mini UI, you'll see a circle. Clicking the circle changes the category of picture. You use the up and down arrows to select a picture to color within the category. There are 10 categories and about 10 pictures to choose from each category. You may have also noticed the lack of music in the game. You can turn on the music by selecting the music node. I'm not entirely sure why the music isn't on by default, but at least it's an option. This game has 11 songs to choose from, and the songs are nice and upbeat, but kind of generic overall. And I'm honestly just glad that they included them in the game. Unfortunately, the music does not turn on automatically, which is why I say I'm glad that they included music at all. The player actually needs to manually turn on the music every time you turn on the game. Changing the song is also a little tedious. You have to click the music note to turn on the song and then click it again to turn it off. When you click the note again, the next song comes on. It would have made sense if they added a scroll option to the music, but otherwise it's just a little hard to navigate through the music. Anyway, now on to the gameplay. There are 3 different size brushes, shapes, and a fill option. There's also a magnifying lens that lets you zoom in on the picture. Here, let's pick one of the coloring options and find something to color. Ugh, what a monochrome disaster. Let's try to spruce it up. Let's try some of the patterns. I want to see how those look. What is this? I guess this is one of the designer's kids? I have no idea, but it's really funny though. So the mouse controls the cursor pretty well. In fact, I only have 2 main gripes about the gameplay overall. The first is that the cursor is pretty big, and some of the areas that you need to fill or color is pretty small. I'm not a big fan of the freehand tool, so I end up accidentally filling in the wrong parts of the drawing when I click the button. And that leads me to my second gripe. You can use the magnifying lens to zoom in, which is great, but if you're working at the top part of the drawing, you may want to select a new color. So then what you have to do is you have to scroll all the way back down to the bottom of the drawing in order to pick a color, and then scroll all the way back up to where you were working. Now there's one more feature to show off. This game gives you the ability to turn your artwork into a 16-piece puzzle. It's a neat feature, but I feel like people would get bored with this pretty quickly. That is, they'd get bored after solving one puzzle. Anyway, let's give it a shot. I need to frame this masterpiece. Okay, so you move the puzzle pieces by clicking on the piece that you want to move to the empty spot. It's pretty simple and doesn't require a whole lot of effort. You get a little bit of fanfare when you finish the puzzle, and then you're immediately taken back to the drawing screen. That's right, you're immediately taken back to the drawing board. So the game states that there is an unprecedented 32,000 colors to make your results truly spectacular in the back of the box. And, well, let's take a look at how many options we actually have. 40 variations of colors and 48 patterns. I wonder if the colors mix. Let's find out.
Doesn't look like it does. Well, that's no fun. I also noticed that when you draw with the brushes that the brush stroke is added. I'm not entirely sure how to control it with the mouse, but it's a pretty neat feature. A bit annoying when you're trying to color something in, but neat nonetheless. Anyway, let's paint a few more pictures. Alright, let's make this happy little dino here. He's a very happy guy.
Well, that's all this game has to offer. I was hoping it would rival Mario Paint, but it doesn't really have too much to offer in terms of variety of gameplay. I will say I did have fun coloring some of the pictures, and the pictures themselves are pretty well made. I feel like most people may get bored with this after coloring a few pictures since that's pretty much all you're able to do. I will say that it is a step up from Color a Dinosaur in the NES though, so it has that going for it. But what about the sequel? Does it improve on the game mechanics in some way?
Well, as you can see from the title screen here, no. In fact, it looks like they're regressing. Where's the cool claymation scene? So, as the game loads, you'll be right back at that familiar user interface that you saw in Paint School 1. That's right, Paint School 2 is basically the same game as Paint School 1, right down to the same paint tools and puzzle mode. Well, I guess if it ain't broke. That being said, there are some differences between the two games. For instance, this game features different music than its predecessor. I think that the songs are not as upbeat as the first game's music, but it's still nice. The patterns have also been changed. Say goodbye to the baby picture, but there are pictures of koalas and tigers. I'll also say while I like the intro of the first Paint School game, this one leaves a lot to be desired. At least it's more appropriate for what the player is about to see. The major difference between the two games is that this game features new artwork to draw, and many are uninspired to say the least. This game features letters and numbers to color, random shapes, and other assorted scenes. Some of the scenes seem kind of lazy to me, as a lot of the artwork elements look like they're copy and pasted. In fact, this shapes picture reminds me of the artwork I used to create back in middle school when they let the class have free time on the computer.
Okay, so Paint School 2 is more of an expansion pack for the fans of the first game. It honestly doesn't add anything new, it just extends the gameplay. A few new drawings and some new music.
That being said, both games didn't impress me as much as I thought they would. We're talking about a CD-based game with similar quality to a SNES title. I mean, the game could have at least played the songs automatically without user input. I guess I just expected a little more from these games, especially from the sequel. I honestly would have liked to have seen more features added, at least more colors and patterns.
All in all, these games certainly aren't bad titles, but it probably wouldn't be my first recommended Paint game. My first recommended Paint game is still Mario Paint. So I was originally planning on giving these games both the same score, but I'm going to change it up given that there's some differences between the two games. So that being said, Paint School 1 gets 3 Pirate Babies out of 5, and Paint School 2 gets 2 Pirate Koalas out of 5. Like I said earlier, I'm not trying to convince anyone that CDI games are going to set the world on fire, but I do want to convince you that they're not as bad as everyone thinks that they are. I do believe the Paint School games are actually pretty decent paint games for the 90s. That being said, next month's pick is a game that I think everyone knows and loves. Tetris.
So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like what you saw, make sure you like and subscribe. If you didn't like the video, feel free to tell me down in the comments about what you think could be improved upon. Either way, as always, thank you for watching.